Hi everyone, my name is Spitty and this is my book channel Booksmitten. In 2024, I listened to 43 audiobooks. That makes up over half the books I actually consumed this past year. So in this video, I thought I would share with you my 5-star listens. In total, we have 6 books, 2 fiction and 4 nonfiction. To be a 5-star audiobook for me, you have to have that 5-star feeling from both the writing and the narration. So for this video, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna paste in an excerpt of my original remarks. If you'd like to see the full remarks, I'll link the videos of my original reviews below. Then I'm gonna offer some updated remarks on how the book still resonates with me to this day. Finally, I'm going to play a little excerpt of the audiobook so you can get an idea of what it sounds like. So let's get into it. First up is Well-Read Black Girl by Glory Edom.
This book is an anthology that celebrates the practice of reading amongst Black women. Now, anthologies are usually hit or miss because sometimes there are stories that you like and sometimes that you don't. But I have to say, I really enjoyed every single story in this anthology. Every chapter is well written and well edited and quite diverse. I think this is an anthology that I could easily listen to over and over again and get something different out of it each time. What's also really cool about this book is that there are a number of reading lists. So if you want to read more books by Black women, this is a great starting point.
The thing about this book that still stands out to me is just the sheer diversity of stories. I remember having moments where I would be doing something and I would just recall certain moments in this book, and they all were from different chapters. I definitely plan on rereading this one for years to come. Now, the author and editor of this anthology, Glory Edom, also narrated this book. Here's a little preview of the narration.
Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman, what did I see to be except myself?
Next up is Queer Ducks by Elliot Schreffer.
This book explores the science behind queerness in the animal kingdom. I learned so much about animals and aspects of the history of science when reading this book. To me, this is truly excellent science writing. Schreffer does a great job of letting the reader know when something's known or unknown, where the nuances are in certain situations, and where the interpretation is coming through. And it doesn't feel patronizing at all. It really just feels like transparency. I personally really love the excerpts and interviews with scientists whose works were featured throughout the book.
This book has truly impacted the way I think about gender and sexuality in my own work. Anytime I'm doing a script for our archaeology channel, which is my other channel, I'm thinking about what are the underlying assumptions about gender and sexuality that are impacting an interpretation or an argument. Now, people in the past definitely thought about gender and sexuality in different ways. Oftentimes, they were different than our own. And there's a lot that we assume and that we don't know. And I really owe it to this book for making me stop and consider these topics and aspects more critically. Now, when it comes to the narration, this was done by an ensemble cast. The narrators were Joel Frumkin, Dustin Ballard, Hope Newhouse, and Neo Sehi. Sometimes when you have an ensemble cast, it can feel like a bit much and sometimes it's hard to follow, but I think this was done in a very balanced way and it was very clear who was talking and when and which characters were coming through at certain times. Here's a preview of what this narration sounds like.
How do you determine if a penguin is male or female? Turns out that it's not easy. Penguin males and females are the same size, and since their genitalia is tucked away, their sex is anyone's guess. Only a modern blood test can tell for sure.
Next up is The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. This book follows Amina, who is a retired middle-aged pirate living in southern Arabia with her daughter and mother. However, she's quite fearful that her past might catch up to her, which it does. She decides to come out of retirement and gather her old crew because she's been offered a huge life-changing sum to track down the missing daughter of one of her former crewmen. Now, this book has fantasy elements, which I did enjoy. However, the star of the show for me was the setting. Now, I'm an archaeologist who primarily works in the Indian Ocean world region, especially in southern Arabia and in the Horn of Africa, and I was ecstatic to see that my regions that I work on were represented and represented well in this book. I think the author did an excellent job of portraying the diverse cultures, customs, religions, and sexualities that were present in this region and how they might have interacted with one another. I also love the details that were sprinkled in, especially on medieval boat building. It clearly showed that the author did her research. When I think of this book, I can't help but smile. I remember talking to a fellow friend and colleague who also works in this geographic region, and we were just gushing about this book. This piece of work has helped me think about the archaeological work that I do in a different way, but it's also brought this place that I worked in for so long to life in a different way. I really think that's the power of fiction, especially good fiction, so I'm really excited for the rest of the books in the series. Now, when it comes to narration, there were two narrators for this book, Lamis Isaac and Amin El-Gamal. They both did a fantastic job. And here's a little preview of what the narration sounds like.
God as my witness, none of this would have ever happened if it were not for those two fools back in Salalah. Them and their map. What? What do you mean that is not how you start a story?
Next up is The Wrong End of the Telescope by Rabi Alameddine.
This novel follows a Lebanese-American trans woman named Mina who travels to the Greek island of Lesbos to assist Syrian refugees. Throughout this novel, we see her reflect on her own life as she is aiding others. Now, Mina is just such a likable character, and I appreciate that there was no unnecessary drama for the main character, and I also appreciated that she was older. I believe she was in her late 50s. There's just so many themes and topics discussed, and it's done so artfully and connected really well, from the refugee experience to people volunteering so they could take selfies, to burnout, to identity, to family relations. There's just a lot going on here, but it's done so well.
There are multiple plot lines and characters from this book that are still so memorable to me now. Probably what resonates to me the most still is the humanity of the refugee experience. When I see the news, especially of late, and I think about what I can do and I work through my feelings about certain things, I often find myself coming back to this book. Now, the narrator for this book is Lamis Isaac. If that sounds familiar, they also were part of the narration team for The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi. However, I'm still going to play a little excerpt of Isaac's performance for this piece so you can get an idea of what this narration sounds like.
He was my people. He and I kneaded by the same hands. He was on the shorter side, my height, not in the greatest of shape. His hair had less gray than mine, but was the same shade of dark. We had similar facial features. I would have recognized that he was from the Levant, even without the Palestine Red Crescent Society vest he sported.
Next up is Blood by Jen Gunter.
This book goes into what we do and don't know about menstruation, as well as medical history, cultural myths, and stigmas around periods in general. She really brings the reader along and breaks down different concepts really well, and she provides really intriguing examples and comparisons to help us understand what's going on in many of our bodies. I think the way that she writes about scientific studies and statistical data helps the reader understand the nuances and limitations to what the data and results can say. She also offers practical tips about advocating for yourself when you might go see a medical provider. I love that each chapter had a summary or takeaway at the end, so after she's just shared all this information with you in great detail, you still have an idea of what you should take away or could remember from a particular chapter.
Now, I've read a few books on menstruation, and I still have a few more books that I'd like to read, but so far, Blood is my favorite. The accessible writing and the way Gunter just walks you through the book are just such strong points. When it comes to narration, Jen Gunter narrated this book herself. Here's a preview of her narration.
Menstruation is a rare phenomenon in the animal kingdom, experienced only by humans, most other primates, a few species of bats, the elephant shrew, and the spiny mouse. All told, less than 2% of mammals menstruate, although it's possible that number could be slightly on the low side.
Last up is A Renaissance of Our Own, a memoir and manifesto on reimagining by Rachel Cargill.
Honestly, this title sums up the book beautifully. It's part memoir, in which you get to learn a bit about Rachel Cargill's life, and it's also part manifesto, in which she publicly declares how she's reflecting and reimagining her life from this moment and moving forward. Personally, I thought the book beautifully balanced both memoir and manifesto. Cargill is a reflective and wonderful writer. Each chapter focuses on a specific reimagining, like reimagining relationships, reimagining education. The chapter on reimagining work deeply resonated with me. On BookTube, we often mention that certain books just find you at the right time, and I really believe that about this book for me personally. Honestly, this is one of those books that I find to be quite life-changing because it really made me not only think, but rethink and reimagine how I want to think about and approach things moving forward.
I think people in my life, especially that are rethinking things about their life, they have heard me recommend this book to them. The chapter on reimagining work is still such a guiding light for me to this day. Also, one of her core values, ease, has made me really stop and think about how I can make certain tasks and certain things that I do more easeful in my life. So that's another concept from this book that still resonates with me. Now, Cargill narrated this herself, and she did a fantastic job. Here's a little preview of her narration.
Dear listener, my entire life is a testament to reimagining. What was given to me when I was a child was a life defined by limitations and rules. What was expected of me, what was offered to me, was barely enough to fit in the palm of my hand.
So those are my 5-star listens in 2024. Now, I tend to read a lot of audiobooks, and I even have a whole video dedicated to finding audiobooks that work for you. So if you're curious about that video, it's going to be linked right here. That's all for this video, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.